Can you all hear me? Mr. Chairman of the occasion, Dr. Cosmas Udofort, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Nyaudo Ndeyo, our esteemed celebrant, Professor Akpan Ekpo, all protocols respectfully and faithfully observed. Our elders say that knowledge is a garden. If it isn't cultivated, you cannot harvest it. I therefore want to thank Professor Ntiedo Moren and the organizers for inviting me to deliver this third Akpan Ekpo birthday lecture. Judging by the illustrious personalities that have preceded me on this podium, I am humbled, and let me also appreciate all of you who have taken time from your very busy schedules, particularly our amiable Vice Chancellor and other distinguished personalities who have spared time from their busy schedules to be here this afternoon, or this morning rather. I thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. I have known our distinguished celebrant for almost 2 decades. We were colleagues on the board of directors of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Our paths also crossed when we both served on the same Macroeconomics Policy Committee in 2009 during the crafting of the Vision 2020 document. Throughout the years that I've known him, Professor Ekpo has not only been an economist of rare erudition, he has been a consummate administrator and public servant with an uncommon commitment to social justice, patriotism, and professional integrity. A true professional in the best traditions of the scholarly vocation, as laid out long ago by the German sociologist Max Weber. A true Nigerian patriot, an illustrious son of Akwa Ibom and of the Niger Delta. The Wolof people of Senegal have a saying: knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sand. Let us please give a standing ovation to this scholar of knowledge and wisdom and erudition. Thank you very much. Because I was given a free hand, I have chosen as my topic for today's lecture, insecurity and economic development in Nigeria. Mr. Chairman, insecurity is the single biggest challenge facing our country today. Insecurity and violent conflict have impacted gravely not only on our economic prospects, but on the very foundations of our nationhood and survival as a democracy, and indeed as a viable country in the Comity of Nations. It has eroded the glue of trust and solidarity that once held communities together. New secessionist groups are emerging, generating fear and anxiety among mass publics. The smell of war is in the atmosphere. It reminds me of the Doomsday Lamentations by the poet Christopher Okigbo. And I quote, "And the secret thing in its heaving threatens with iron mask the last lighted torch of the century." My remarks today will focus on human security and development, the economics of insecurity, economic and social consequences, and the quest for a new agenda for policy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you all know that Boko Haram started as far back as the dawn of the new millennium. They began innocently enough as a bunch of local ascetics committed to more puritanical forms of Islam in the suburbs of Maiduguri. The death of their leader and founder, Muhammad Yusuf, in the hands of the police in July 2009, ended up radicalizing the group into a lethal weapon of global jihad. Nurtured and patronized by local politicians, Boko Haram metamorphosed into a sophisticated terrorist organization with worldwide linkages and networks. They have bombed, they have killed, they have maimed and raped on a staggering scale, indiscriminately, women, children, girls, elderly, youth. An estimated 100,000 people. According to a colleague in the United States who was following this, I was arguing with him just a few weeks ago. I said the figure is closer to 60,000. He said he's a white man. He said no, it is actually more than 100,000 so far. With, according to him, more than 15 million people affected and more than 3.5 million internally displaced refugees. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, unbeknownst to us, we have been in another civil war for at least a decade. As far back as August 2011, Boko Haram formally made a declaration of war against Nigeria. In a media statement through one of his spokespersons, Malam Sani Umaru, they reavowed their commitment to full implementation of Sharia law and to total eradication of what they call Western civilization in Nigeria. They revealed how they would launch a military campaign throughout our major cities and towns and villages, while systematically eliminating all those who stand on their way. They have vowed to make our country ungovernable. Our people say that a person who sells eggs in the market should not start a fight. The fall of Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and the collapse of the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq have led to a massive influx of arms and radical Islamists into the Sahel and into West Africa. These new forces have given added impetus to Boko Haram and to their fellow travelers like the herdsmen militias, the mercenary bandits, and the rest of them. Nigeria today has become the kidnap capital of the world, in addition to the unenviable prize of being the world capital of poverty. We are the third most terrorized nation after Afghanistan and Somalia. Ladies and gentlemen, in the best of times, we are a divided people. With the onslaught of these atrocities, our traditional fault lines have become more pronounced than ever. We have sadly become what the French would term un état divisé. Just because the lizard nods his head doesn't mean he is in agreement, says an ancient African proverb. Sadly, I have to confess that from what it looks like from the body language and the gestalt of our federal government, it looks as if they are maintaining a double standard. One day it is Ruga, Another day it is cattle colony. Another day it is grazing reserves. Another day it is transit routes. What they have as a priority is cows, not technology. They also operate a double standard. Like the proverbial cat who voted on both sides over the matter of rats in George Orwell's Animal Farm. They seem more eager to designate the indigenous peoples of Biafra, Ekpo, for example, as a terrorist organization, rather than the herdsmen militias, who are considered the fourth most deadly organization on earth, and all the mercenary bandits and their genocidal atrocities. Ladies and gentlemen, the starting point of our analysis is that the current crisis is essentially a failure of human security. The human security paradigm provides a more expansive framework beyond the narrow scope of national security, which is the traditional approach to these things. And the national security is anchored on the defense of the state and of its apparatus. The concept of human security has been defined in terms of the obligation of the state to provide a facilitating environment for equality and individual participation of the people through democracy, adherence to human rights, the rule of law, and participation of civil society. Safety, empowerment, freedom, liberty, and justice. As understood here, human security embraces the responsibility to protect individuals and communities within and across nations from physical and emotional insecurity of war, violence and conflict, as well as natural and man-made disasters. Violent terror and the state of fear that it engenders is clearly one of the major threats to the security of individuals as it is of communities and nations. The economics of insecurity. Economists and other social scientists have divergent approaches to analysis of insecurity and violent conflict. Political scientists focus on the grievances that drive rebel actors to want to take up arms against the state. Economists like Paul Collier, my former teacher, by contrast, focus on opportunity for profit maximization by alienated groups in resource-abundant countries. In real life, however, we know that profit maximization is hardly the sole explanatory variable as to why men rebel. Issues of horizontal and vertical inequity also matter, as does identity politics and the sentiments of belonging or exclusion. Social scientists and military strategists have continued to debate the factors accounting for the resurgence of terrorism and insecurity. These factors range from the impact of globalization to elite alienation, the failed state syndrome, and economic, social, and psychological trends and influences. For the economists, the issue revolves around factors such as the role of wealth and trade, levels as well as costs and possible benefits of violent conflict, public choice and game theory, which are part of the methodologies and paradigms of new economic science, economic theory. Public choice and game theory have shifted the debate from cost and benefits to economic opportunities that open up for individuals and groups in the drama of violent conflict. A large body of statistical work and econometric analysis have been done by the World Bank and others in an attempt to better understand the determinants of conflict and insecurity. A recent World Bank study shows a strong correlation between the level of wealth of a country and its chances of succumbing to civil war. That is to say, the more wealthy a country is, the lesser are the chances, and so on. Several economic studies also found that there is a link between growth and insecurity. High growth countries open up more opportunities for young people, while expanding the possibility frontiers for welfare. Another key element is natural resources. For countries with weak leadership and poor governance institutions, where corruption and rent-seeking behavior is rife, natural resources such as oil, diamond, gold, precious stones can prove to be more of a curse than a blessing. This has been true of countries such as Sierra Leone, Liberia, Central African Republic, DRC, Angola, and the rest of them. In terms of the economic impact, the evolving literature shows that war and insecurity undermine long-term growth, physical capital formation, human capital, and total factor productivity, TFP. Violent conflicts undermine long-term growth by taking away resources from investments into purchase of guns and other implements of warfare. They also undermine the business ecosystem while driving away foreign investors. Violent conflicts destroy physical infrastructures, from bridges to schools, hospitals, clinics, rail tracks, and electrical installations that have been built over decades. The uncertainty engendered by insecurity leads to a higher structure of interest rates, which in turn undermine long-term investments while leading to capital flight and financial hemorrhaging. Let us look at some of the issues involved in terms of the causative elements. One of them, obviously, is globalization. By globalization, Mr. Chairman, sir, we are referring to the internationalization of production, markets, and capital, and the virtual emergence of a single global marketplace. It also entails the transborder diffusion of knowledge and information through new technologies such as the World Wide Web, the internet, mobile telephony, and the rest of them. Globalization has brought with it positive fallouts in terms of improved international trade and investments, providing an impetus for growth and global welfare. Indeed, the rise of the new economic powers, such as China, India, Mexico, Brazil, Turkey, would not have been possible without the relaxation of domestic as well as global barriers to trade and the movement of people, capital, goods, and services. Thanks to liberalization and digital technologies, our world has become the proverbial global village. The internationalization of world markets, expansion in global trade, movement in capital through instantaneous communication, and impact of electronic communications has transformed business at the speed of light. Unfortunately, there is a downside to the story. Globalization has engendered new forms of vulnerabilities for nations and communities, financial contagion, and the spread of epidemic viral diseases, such as COVID-19, Ebola, and the rest of them, have created more risks for individuals as well as nations and communities. Communities that have hitherto lived in cultural cocoons have suddenly found themselves exposed to new habits and mindsets. Terrorist networks such as Al-Qaeda and ISWAP have become transnational organizations that thrive on opportunities opened by new technologies and communications channels. Not only are they able to coordinate their activities through such channels, they're also able to raise funds, network, and coordinate their activities across national borders with greater ease than would have been considered feasible a few decades ago. Professor Akpan, Ekpo, deans, professors, colleagues, and friends, globalization has to some extent altered the character of the Westphalian territorial state as we have always known it. In a liberal market economy, the state is expected to restrict itself to playing the role of umpire while looking after public goods such as law and order, transport, infrastructures, education, and control of communicable diseases. There's a sense in which globalization has eroded the traditional parental authority of the state, while undermining its capacity, authority, and legitimacy. Of late, we have witnessed the emergence of powerful non-state actors who vie for authority, power, and monopoly of the use of violence. Max Weber, that I alluded to earlier, gave the most classic definition of the state as that institution that has the monopoly of the use of violence. Ibn Khaldun, the great medieval Arab North African philosopher and jurist, gave an even more interesting definition. He defined the state as the sole institution that is allowed to commit crime and to get away with it. But if there are other actors competing for the use of force and the instruments of violence with the state, then it becomes a serious issue for the state. There is also the fact of growing inequality as a result of globalization. As recently explained by the French economist Thomas Piketty, his book, Capital in the 21st Century, he argued that in the last 50 or so years, and he developed massive longitudinal studies to show that the gap between the rich and the poor has continued to widen beyond anything that has been recorded in the past 4 millenniums of Homo sapiens on Earth. Deepening inequalities between and within nations are fostering new forms of anxiety, frustration, and alienation. We see this phenomenon in countries such as oil-rich Nigeria, where the gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen. In the context of an increasingly desperate young educated and unemployed people who can easily become a ready army to be used by a mad mullah or a sheikh with extremist ideology, or indeed any other adventurer that wants to create his own country. It is also true that there are sociological factors deriving from rapid urbanization, the French sociologist Émile Durkheim spoke about this form of alienation that he called anomie, which has gained its entry into the English language in big, sprawling urban agglomerations, such as you have in Kano, Jos, Port Harcourt, Lagos, Onitsha, shall we say even Uyo and others. You have large armies of unemployed young people, hungry and very angry. And my friends, let's be very honest to ourselves. The geography of poverty in Nigeria and even unemployment wears a predominantly northern toga, in which both unemployment and poverty are ranging around 70% in places like Borno, the Northeast, the Northwest, and the rest of it. So you can see how these trends contribute to creating the fertile ground of insecurity. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, state failure provides yet another explanation for insecurity. For several years, Nigeria has been featured on the Global Index of Failed States. In November 2009, intelligence report from the United States caused a furore when they predicted that Nigeria will disintegrate by the year 2015. When this did not happen, they changed the date to 2020. And when this did not happen, they are now talking about 2030 or 2050. I revere the traditions of social science, but I'm very skeptical when social scientists begin to play the role of prophets. But we have to be honest to ourselves that Nigeria has become a failed state. Former American Ambassador John Campbell and the eminent political scientist Robert Rothbard, they co-authored an article recently in which they described Nigeria as a failed state. And I quote them: Nigeria has become a fully failed state of critical geopolitical concern. Its security challenges are already destabilizing the West African sub-region in the face of resurgent jihadism, making the battles of the Sahel that much more difficult to contain. And spillover from Nigeria's failures ultimately affect the security of Europe and the United States. This designation of repeated failure is not a knee-jerk casual labeling, using emotive and pejorative words. Instead, it is a designation informed by a body of political theory developed at the turn of this century and elaborated upon case by case ever since. End of quote. They are not saying that Nigeria is a collapsed state. There's a difference between a collapsed state and a failed state. A collapsed state is a state that is not functioning whatsoever. A failed state, on the other hand, is a state that cannot meet up with its most elementary obligations, which is defense of lives and property of citizens, and maintenance of the rule of law and basic constitutionalism that guarantees the people a future and a hope. We have failed in that task. Let me also turn to what I call the architecture of global power. That also affects and influences some of the insecurity that we see around us. The anatomy of the 21st century conflict is being shaped by the new architecture of global power. The Cold War created two major centers of rival power, one based in Washington, D.C., the other based in Moscow. China and the group of non-aligned countries provided a shield for those nations who chose to side with neither camp. Today, we live in a largely unipolar world in which the United States is the dominant economic, military, and political power. But of course, it's being increasingly challenged by China. Unfortunately, a unipolar world has proven to be very unstable. America has overextended itself, unlike all empires, like the Roman Empire before it, like the Byzantine Empire before it. Any empire that overextend themselves and get themselves involved in intractable conflicts that cost them so much money will end up, facing the dire prospect of decline. And of course, such decline has meant that the framework for collective security that ought to have helped in policing the world has been undermined. It has been undermined in Washington. It has been undermined in the United Nations organization. And there's only so much that regional institutions such as the African Union, ECOWAS, and the rest can actually do. My friends, we cannot shy away from it. And what I want to say, I say it with the greatest responsibility. I am not a conspiracy theorist, and I do not believe that all our problems are down to all those bloody foreigners. I don't believe that. I believe that every man is the architect of his own fortune or misfortune. But we cannot shy away from the fact that there are world powers that have a vested interest in the disintegration of our country. So I beg of you, in the name of the God of Africa, before we start slaughtering each other, let us remember that there are foreign evil vultures hovering like hyenas, waiting for the dead bodies to pile up. Why? Because they don't want a Nigeria that is going to become a world power. By 2050, our population would have doubled to about 410 million, just behind China and India, and ahead of the United States. And the world powers know that we are, with our immense natural resources, the savoir-faire of our people, our shared intelligence, if given an opportunity, Nigeria will shake the world. They don't want that. No. They want the image of a black man as that little black Sambo who is always going with a cap in hand and begging for the crumbs to fall from the table of the rich man like Lazarus in the Gospels. These external influences are not coming up plainly. They are using covert action. They are using special forces. They are arming our enemies. They are supporting groups and urging them on, lying to them that they are defenders and supporters of Islam. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, Iran, they are nations with blood in their hands. We cannot forget France and one or two other world powers, which I shall not name for security reasons. because these people are very wicked and very diabolical. So I urge all of you, in the name of everything that we hold most dear, before we start slaughtering each other, let us remember that our enemies are also behind this. Yes, they are using our people, but they are the people behind this. And we must be careful and ensure that we meet them at the gates, and we stand up for truth, we stand up for righteousness. The insecurity that we face has destroyed the Nigerian economy. Today, the naira is over 500 to the dollar in the parallel market. In fact, I'm told it is over 700 naira to the British pound sterling. And from the way it's going, it will not be long before the naira goes to about 1,000 to the dollar. We are facing a very dire situation. Poverty is increasing. Lawlessness, nihilistic violence, hopelessness. Our young people, all of them, are looking for opportunities to leave the country. Foreign direct investment is moving to Ghana, and capital flight is taking place. There is deindustrialization taking place, and most of the money meant for security and defense actually is not going for that purpose. Recently, the National Assembly had reason to believe that more than $1 trillion of money meant for security and defense cannot be properly accounted for. It has been a total disaster. It looks to us as if some people, having benefited so much from the insurgency and the insecurity, have developed a vested interest in ensuring that this evil is never brought to its knees, that will never succeed in defeating the monsters of insecurity, violence, and lawlessness. It has become a vested interest for many. That is why tackling it will require exceptional qualities of leadership, courage, and vision. Now, that according to the African proverb, will speak with a soft voice, but carry a very big stick to deal with this evil. My friends, this is evil, and we must call it by its name. I am suggesting a different approach to tackling these issues. My approach is based on carrot and sticks altogether. According to the Zulus of South Africa, it is what an animal eats that is normally used to set a trap for him. Our approach differs from all the others by its inclusion of the elements of state building. It is anchored on a socio-economic reconstruction and political engagement strategy. It comprises prevention, protection, preparation, prosecution, rehabilitation, and political engagement. My paper details some of these issues, and I shall not, spend time on them. When you read the paper, you will see the details of how I have laid out this new approach. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, at the heart of this new approach is political engagement, the imperative of engaging with key stakeholders, ruling elites, the political opposition, civil society, traditional elders, religious leaders, and organized private sector. We must bring everybody together into a concordance of hope and mapping out a comprehensive and constructive approach based on a national consensus on how to tackle this evil, how to defeat this evil, and together rebuild the institutions of our country and providing hope for our people. Tackling insecurity requires hammering out a new national compact while redefining the Nigerian national project. Nigeria has to be reinvented and redesigned so as to secure a just and lasting peace among its various nationalities. Ultimately, we not only must confront terrorism and all its ramifications, we have to tackle its root causes, which lie in inequality, social deprivation, poor governance, corruption, mass alienation, and political decay. This in turn must be linked to the creation of a new national security paradigm anchored on promoting human security, economic empowerment, and human development. It was Mohammed Sultan Bello who said that when a king has good counselors, his reign is peaceful. The experience of other countries shows that the most effective counterterrorism strategies are those that are anchored on a firm and resolute determination by a purpose-driven government to preserve the common peace while securing the lives and properties of all citizens. Authorities must leave terrorists in no doubt that their actions would always be countered by an equal and opposite force, and that they will be prosecuted and punished, and those who finance them stand to lose everything. Any wavering or prevarication, any indication of weakness or appeasement, such as Gumi, I think he's misguided, I think he's very wrong-headed, and I think he's leading us into greater calamity if we are to listen to what he's trying to say. Professor Akpan Ekpo, my brother, my friend, global jihadists respect only strength and power. Therefore, we must give it to them as much as they expect. But in saying this, the possibilities of dialogue must never be foreclosed. We are statesmen. We are not brigands. We are statesmen and women, and because that is what we are, the door must always be open for some kind of constructive dialogue. But it must be based on strength, not weakness. In concluding my remarks this morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our elders have always cautioned that we must never call the forest that shelters us a jungle. So Nigeria is not a jungle. But let us agree that no nation survives 2 civil wars. Nigeria is no exception to the rule. Indeed, Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka has recently warned that Nigeria is already at the verge of disintegration unless urgent action is taken to re-engineer the country's constitutional foundations. We stand at that twilight zone in which any wrong or misguided action can spell disaster for our country. With the onslaught of all the evils that we are seeing, the country faces the grim prospect of a conflagration that could make the Rwanda genocide look like a mere pantomime. Violent conflict, insurgency, and terror of the moral fiber of free societies. The practical wisdom of the greatest economist of the 20th century, Lord John Maynard Keynes, is also for these times. In his famous book, The Economic Consequences of Peace, John Maynard Keynes warned that men will not always die quietly. Those who have profiteered from the war economy of these brutal times will do everything to maintain the status quo and their privileges. We must put them to shame. We must bring them to disgrace. Our elders used to say that an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. In fighting the existential evils of our time, we must avoid a punitive approach that amounts to contempt for human life and for civility. Just like John Maynard Keynes warned about the Versailles Treaty that was based on a punitive humiliation for Germany, which ended up sowing the seeds of another worse and more destructive conflagration. In rebuilding our country, in laying the foundation for a more enduring prosperity, we must bring everyone on board, youth and elders, men and women, civil society, the private sector, our traditional leaders, everybody will bring together into a new national compact of hope and opportunity to build a new foundation for liberty, for justice, for freedom. I'll be with you. It was Albert Einstein who famously declared that God does not play dice with the universe. He was a philosopher of science. He was a physicist, and he was talking about cosmology, that God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't play dice with the universe. I dare say that God did not make a mistake in putting Nigeria together. Groups such as Biafra, Oduduwa, Middle Belt have been calling for self-determination and even secession. But I'm persuaded that God doesn't make mistakes. God is doing a great thought experiment. He is trying to figure out if out of these multifarious groups and ethnic communities, we can build a nation that is a prosperous democracy and that is a guardian and defender of African civilization. I dare say that if Nigeria makes it, there is hope for Africa and the black race. If, on the other hand, Nigeria forget Africa, forget the black race, the Amhara people of Ethiopia have this proverb: milk and honey have different colors, but they share the same house peacefully. When you add them to your tea or your coffee, you add them, they mix peacefully and they don't complain. And in fact, what you get is a better product. Mr. Chairman, sir, a generation of Nigerians tempered by war and tutored by a hard and bitter peace appreciates more than any other that civility and restraint are the only true cause for the survival of a multi-ethnic and multi-religious democracy such as ours. Bad governance and poor leadership have exposed the weaknesses and egregious inequities of the 1999 Constitution. Nigerians have woken up to the fact that it is not only an illegitimate contraption, it is a patent violation of the secular grand norm that has defined our constitutional compact since 1914. That constitution starts with the word, with the phrase, "we the people," but it is a fraudulent lie, because we the people did not sit somewhere and authorize somebody to present this constitution to us. It was delivered to us, imposed from above by military fired and military dictatorship from the dark chambers of General Abacha's brutal military despotism. Re-engineering our federation and building a fairer and more robust union is necessary, but not a sufficient condition. So restructuring the constitution, reaffirming and redesigning this constitution is necessary, but it is not the road to Uhuru. It's the road to Uhuru, but it is not Uhuru in itself, because constitutional government everywhere, from the American Constitution, to the French Fifth Republic Constitution, to the ancient constitution of the people of England. It is one thing to lay down the writ. The other is to abide by the restraints, by the guardrails, and by those conventions that make for tolerance, civility, restraint, and accommodation. It calls for a new generation of leaders that have a more progressive and a more enlightened and more compassionate mindset. We must operate with tough love. When you love your child, you discipline him with love, but you must discipline him. We must get Nigerians back to work within a framework of the rule of law, respect for due procedures, and justice and discipline. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, honorables here present, my lords, spiritual and temporal, deans and professors, members of the media, students and friends, the words of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, proclaimed to a different generation and in a different context, are nonetheless relevant for us today. And I quote, "True individual freedom cannot exist. People who are hungry and out of a jaw are the stuff of which dictatorships are made." Indeed, freedom and security go together. And to quote yet another great thinker, Karl Popper, great philosopher of science, he said, and I quote, "We must plan for freedom, and not only for freedom, but also for security. If for no other reason than that only freedom can make security secure. And only a new Nigeria can meet the hopes and aspirations of its many people. I am an old-fashioned Nigerian patriot. I prefer a bigger nation than a fragmented one. And I believe that Nigeria has a great destiny. The destiny of our country is to be the symbol and hope of the Black race. God wants this country to become a progressive technological industrial state among the first ranks of the civilized nations of the 21st century. If we get the right leadership, if we focus on what matters, on the nitty-gritty of development, getting our people back to work, disciplining those who believe they can divide and undermine the peace, providing fairness for everyone, building our infrastructures, fixing power and electricity, getting the great Nigerian people back to work, equipping our young people with the skills and with the jobs and opportunities that they need. If we can do all these things, I bet you, I promise you, Nigeria will surprise the world. Our vision is, our minimum benchmark is Germany and Japan. Nigeria is yet destined for greatness. God bless you, and thank you so very much for your patient listening. Thank you once again.